Breaking news, federal and local authorities have conducted a series of raids in San Pedro, targeting members and also associates of the Mexican Mafia.
The targets of RICO conspiracy and others participated in the RSP enterprise in a variety of ways. Some would use orders from prison on behalf of the Mexican Mafia. These orders include the collection of taxes, drug distribution, firearms, transfers, and decisions about who held what positions within the RSP.
Los Angeles has become something far uglier. An unseen war has erupted.
After hours of standing off, this situation has now rapidly deteriorated. The LAPD moving in on horseback, firing rubber bullets at protesters, moving them on through the heart of LA.
Old-world mafia families quietly stepping out of the shadows and colliding head-on with the drug cartels that once ruled the streets. What used to be quiet deals done in backrooms has turned into ambushes, firebombed warehouses, and bodies showing up where no one is supposed to look. The city isn't a backdrop anymore. It's the battlefield. The hidden alliance that built a billion-dollar empire. For many decades, the Italian-American Mafia and the Mexican cartels operated in a secret partnership that most people in law enforcement and in the general public never fully understood. Their worlds were very different, yet each side needed something the other side controlled. The Mafia had survived for generations because it learned how to move money quietly and safely. It built relationships with bankers who were willing to overlook suspicious deposits. It created shell companies that looked legitimate from a distance. It also maintained offshore accounts that hid criminal profits behind legal paperwork. These financial tools gave the Mafia the ability to turn illegal profits into legitimate money. The Mexican cartels did not have that type of infrastructure. What they had instead was sheer scale. They controlled enormous supplies of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and later fentanyl. These drugs moved from the south toward the United States in steady waves that never slowed down. The cartels controlled production and trafficking routes, and they handled violence with ruthless efficiency. The partnership between the two sides was not based on friendship. It was based on survival. In the 1980s, the United States government launched aggressive investigations that targeted Colombian cocaine routes. These operations disrupted the old smuggling paths and forced many criminal groups to shift their strategies. When the Colombian routes became too dangerous and unstable, the Mexican cartels stepped into the vacuum and gained full control of distribution across the border. During this same time, the Mafia faced its own crisis. The government used the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, also known as RICO, to dismantle large parts of the Mafia. Many leaders were arrested. Power structures collapsed. Territories that used to be tightly controlled began to weaken. The Mafia quickly realized it could no longer survive by relying on old methods alone, so it changed its focus.
Also, Paulie could do anything, especially run up bills on the joint's credit.
Instead of fighting for control of city streets, it concentrated on financial operations. It managed logistics, handled protection services, and provided laundering systems for the cartels. The cartels controlled the product and the routes. The Mafia controlled the money and the infrastructure behind it. Federal task forces later described this period as an invisible merger because the cooperation was hidden under layers of legitimate business activity. Cocaine shipments entered the port of Los Angeles through containers that carried proper freight paperwork. Inspectors saw what appeared to be ordinary goods. Criminal investigators later learned that the port was a perfect entry point because thousands of containers passed through every day and only a small portion were ever opened and inspected. Once the drugs were inside the country, the money from the sales moved through businesses that looked normal to anyone walking through the streets. Some of these businesses actually sold real products, while others only existed on paper. They created fake invoices that matched up with the amounts of dirty money coming in. Once the money passed through these fronts, it appeared clean. That clean capital was then moved into homes, cars, restaurants, and even new technology companies. Many of the people who invested in these companies had no idea that the money came from narcotics. The entire system worked in a very organized and predictable way for about 50 years. But everything changed in early 2025. Investigators seized encrypted financial records during an operation that targeted mid-level cartel managers. When analysts broke into the files, they found payment logs that showed something alarming. The cartels had begun removing the Mafia from major deals. The logs showed that large amounts of money, which used to pass through Mafia-controlled accounts, were now being routed through new channels. These new channels did not include Mafia-backed banks or businesses. The Mafia noticed that its profits were shrinking, and when money stops flowing evenly, bullets usually follow. This subtopic is about how the war started between cartels and mafia using ports, airports for attacks. Yes, it started mildly at this subtopic, but the attacks isn't pronounced. It gives too much focus to the system, and not these mild attacks starting to happen in these places. We don't really see the streets battleground at all. Too mild. So work exactly with this original passage below, but fix this. From pipeline to battlefield. The breakdown of the criminal alliance pushed Los Angeles into a level of fear most residents could feel, even if they could not explain it. The war did not begin with giant shootouts or dramatic chases. It began with sudden, surgical bursts of violence appearing in places no one expected. Federal surveillance teams watching the city started logging a pattern of small but deliberate strikes around the port of Los Angeles. Cameras captured groups of armed men slipping between stacks of cargo containers, their weapons kept just out of sight, but ready. They moved like trained units, choosing blind spots, timing their approach, and attacking selected targets with quick, ruthless efficiency. Victims were found slumped behind dumpsters, inside empty shipping yards, or inside trucks that never made it past the gate. Officials later said this was the first confirmed clash between cartel-backed operatives and mafia-linked crews on American soil. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach move nearly half of America's overseas cargo, and that volume turned into the perfect cover for escalating violence. Freight containers arrived every hour, creating endless hiding places and endless chances to intercept each other's shipments. What looked like ordinary crates filled with clothing or electronics sometimes held false walls packed with fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, or bundles of washed money. Even veteran inspectors needed minutes of probing to detect the hidden spaces. These ports, once symbols of commerce, became a tense battleground where criminal groups tried to sabotage each other's cargo without attracting public attention. As pressure increased at the docks, traffickers shifted to the cargo terminals at Los Angeles International Airport. Airport shipments moved faster and with far fewer checks, which made them ideal for smuggling couriers disguised synthetic drugs as toys, kitchen appliances, and bulk retail boxes.
All right, andale, boys, let's deliver some freedom.
Rival crews began staking out the airport's loading areas, following suspicious packages, and snatching couriers in the brief windows between drop-off and takeoff. When a pallet went missing, or a courier simply didn't show up again, both sides understood that someone had struck first. Street gangs caught in the middle quickly realized neutrality was no longer possible. Groups such as 18th Street, Avenues, and affiliates tied to the Mexican Mafia tried to stay out of the conflict. But each major organization demanded loyalty. Soon, these gangs were carrying out surveillance near warehouses, performing fast kidnappings in narrow alleys, and conducting quiet shootings inside dim parking structures. Orders came through encrypted apps that erased each message the moment it was viewed. Unmarked SUVs roamed neighborhoods at all hours, letting enforcers slip in, execute a mission, and disappear before anyone registered what had happened. Residents noticed vehicles idling longer than they should, or strangers appearing on their streets with no explanation. The violence stayed just out of sight, but it was close enough to feel. And while the streets were beginning to change, another war was taking place behind the scenes. One fought not with gunfire, but with servers, accounting systems, and digital money. This has the same issue. It's mostly about the contexts and doesn't show the financial war between the cartels and Mafia. We should start seeing this heavily right from the beginning. So work with this original version and add in all these so we see the financial war. The financial war. The war between the cartels and the Mafia continued inside bank accounts, warehouses, and small businesses that looked harmless from the street. Both sides treated money as a weapon. Every transaction, every transfer, and every account was a chance to cut the other side out, steal a profit stream, or expose a weakness. As federal agents pushed deeper into the investigation, they realized they were not looking at a criminal network. They were looking at two competing financial empires fighting for control of the same underground economy. Cartel accountants worked alongside Italian financial intermediaries, but the partnership was tense from the beginning. Each side monitored the other, searching for hidden accounts and secret profit routes. They built digital systems that tracked enormous amounts of money, not to stay organized, but to make sure no one could skim off the top. Crypto wallets replaced the old briefcases filled with cash. These wallets moved currency through international markets fast enough to prevent either side from interfering with the other's transfers. Fake import companies pretended to trade electronics and textiles, but they were also used to hide money from supposed allies inside the network. The black market peso exchange. once a simple laundering method, evolved into a battlefield. The new AI-driven version allowed both sides to manipulate exchange rates, delay transfers, or reroute funds to punish one another. Money entered the system clean and came out dirty, or disappeared entirely depending on who controlled the route. Every change left agents further behind, and every missing dollar added fuel to the conflict. Los Angeles' fashion district became ground zero for this financial war. Many shops that looked like discount clothing stores were actually command centers used by both sides. The backrooms held cash counting machines, encrypted servers, and lists of accounts that belonged not just to partners, but to rivals. When the Mafia wanted to send a message, they shut down or robbed a cartel-controlled shop. When the cartels wanted revenge, they blocked Mafia transfers by overwhelming shared servers with fake digital requests. Chinese financial groups working with the cartels also created delays that froze Mafia assets, and the Mafia responded by leaking those groups' U.S. contacts to investigators. The Mafia's value came from its long history of financial manipulation. They controlled Delaware shell companies, Beverly Hills property networks, and consultants who could open accounts overseas. These tools kept the system running, but they also gave the Mafia leverage. Whenever they felt the cartels were gaining too much power, they used these assets to choke the flow of money or reroute funds into accounts the cartels could not access. The partnership finally collapsed when the cartels built new financial routes that removed the Mafia entirely. The Mafia discovered this through leaked internal records. That betrayal cut deeper than any street attack. In response, Mafia leaders began feeding cartel transaction data to federal agents. They did it not for justice, but to destroy the cartel's financial structure and reclaim control of the underground economy. That single act turned a cold financial rivalry into a full-scale war, and every dollar that moved after that became part of the fight. When business turned to blood. By mid-2025, the city of Los Angeles entered a period of fear that grew with each passing day. At first, the incidents appeared isolated. A body was found in an abandoned lot one morning. Another was discovered near a loading dock the following night. Within a week, emergency call centers were overwhelmed with similar reports coming from different parts of the city. Many of the victims were tied to financial networks that supported the criminal underworld. They included couriers who handled sensitive records, operators who managed coded shipments, and brokers who negotiated deals for both sides. Each attack was carried out with a level of precision that stunned investigators. There were no frantic escapes and no signs of struggle. The operations were so clean and so controlled that they appeared to vanish the moment they ended. Authorities realized these were not random crimes. They were coordinated strikes delivered with professional skill. Kidnappings increased with the same steady rhythm. A victim disappeared after leaving a restaurant one night. Another vanished after receiving a late-evening phone call during the next week. Warehouse clerks, logistics managers, and financial assistants began to disappear without explanation. Family members described unusual behavior in the days leading up to each disappearance. Some victims appeared frightened, but refused to explain why. Others mentioned problems with deliveries or strange inquiries from unknown callers. Investigators quickly understood that these kidnappings were not simple attempts at ransom. They were extraction operations meant to gather information, remove strategic targets, or punish individuals who tried to remain neutral. Federal agencies eventually connected these events to the escalating rivalry between the Italian-backed organization known as RSP Enterprise and the cartel factions that controlled major trafficking routes. RSP Enterprise focused on revenge for unpaid debts and broken financial agreements. Their operatives tracked cartel couriers, cornered them in isolated locations, and eliminated them before they could reach their next destination. These actions disrupted shipments and forced the cartels to reroute their financial flows. The cartels responded with equal aggression. They burned the businesses that funneled money to the Mafia. They eliminated brokers who refused to switch loyalty. They flooded neighborhoods with large amounts of fentanyl to destabilize the markets controlled by their rivals. Investigators labeled this tactic as a slow-moving strike designed to damage the financial backbone of the opposition. Civilians suffered the most as the days passed. Families who had no idea their shops had served as laundering points watched their buildings burn to the ground. Informants who once spoke in whispers to federal agents disappeared before they could deliver their final pieces of information. Criminal groups no longer relied on written instructions or traditional conversational arrangements. They issued digital kill orders through encrypted systems that wiped themselves clean seconds after delivery. Every attack, every fire, every abduction, and every disappearance served a dual purpose. They punished an enemy and sabotaged the network that supported that enemy's financial strength. While investigators moved from crime scene to crime scene, they began to understand that something deeper was unfolding beneath the violence. These organizations were not simply striking at one another through brutal acts. They were reshaping the way power worked within the underworld. The violence was not only growing, it was evolving, and the city of Los Angeles had become the proving ground for this new and dangerous form of organized crime. Evolution of organized crime, the new machine. The deeper federal agents pushed into the investigation, the more alarming the pattern became. They realized they were not dealing with a single cartel or a single mafia group. They were facing something far more advanced. It behaved like a living system that absorbed new methods and new technologies without hesitation. It operated with the flexibility of a startup company and the secrecy of a military intelligence program. Laptops seized during raids revealed detailed logistics maps that resembled the operational plans used by armed forces. These maps showed supply routes, response timetables, and fallback paths that anticipated police interference. Investigators also found financial forecasts, created with the same precision used in major corporations, automated programs inside the laptops, calculated narcotics movement with routing algorithms that adjusted themselves based on traffic conditions, port inspections, and law enforcement presence. The network functioned through a structure that mimicked regional corporate offices. It maintained payroll systems that distributed money to operatives, couriers, and financial specialists. It employed digital accountants who managed enormous sums through blockchain ledgers. These ledgers updated in real time and erased outdated information before agents could complete their analysis. Each discovery revealed a deeper level of organization. During one operation known as Iron Veil, Homeland Security uncovered a shocking detail: cartel shipments were being attached to the lawful trade flow of well-known Fortune 500 companies. Containers carrying illegal cargo traveled inside the same shipping networks as legitimate goods.
This was not like just any other drug trafficking case. Yes, drugs are smuggled on container ships every day.
They moved through ports, warehouses, and transportation hubs under the same satellite tracking systems used by major corporations. This allowed the criminal network to hide within a legitimate supply chain that spanned the globe. The combination of organized crime and digital finance produced a system that traditional law enforcement agencies struggled to counter. Every time the government froze an account, a new replacement account appeared in a foreign jurisdiction. These accounts operated from countries known for limited cooperation with international investigations. When agents conducted raids and attempted to seize computers, encrypted servers activated automated backup systems. These systems transferred data to distant locations within seconds. The operations rebuilt themselves before investigators could examine the seized files. Each setback for the criminal network seemed temporary, while each victory for law enforcement seemed to disappear under the weight of the network's rapid recovery. This was no longer a simple criminal organization. It had evolved into a fully functional cyber-driven corporation. And like all corporations, it was expanding. What began in Los Angeles was now replicating across America. The network spreads across the nation. Before federal authorities understood how deeply the criminal structure had spread, evidence from Los Angeles began appearing in other major cities. Financial blueprints that matched the Los Angeles model surfaced during investigations in Houston, Chicago, Atlanta, and Miami. Each location revealed a network that looked exactly like the one uncovered on the West Coast. These networks did not resemble amateur operations. They functioned as replicas built with precise coordination. Investigators found the same laundering processes that used layers of fake business invoices. They identified the same groups of Chinese financial brokers who moved money through offshore markets. They also discovered identical cryptocurrency exchanges and import-export companies that acted as fronts for billions in illegal revenue. The scale and consistency of these findings convinced analysts that these operations were not independent. They were connected parts of one expanding structure. Federal intelligence teams began using the term criminal contagion to describe this spread. The word captured the speed and adaptability of the system. When law enforcement dismantled one hub, the network reappeared through a different route within a short time. Digital backups allowed the organization to restore its operations almost instantly. Offshore intermediaries stepped in to replace arrested financial managers. Shell companies reactivated under new names. Crypto platforms shifted to alternative servers. Each setback seemed temporary because the system could regenerate as long as one functioning node remained active. The threat level escalated quickly. Intelligence briefings delivered in Washington explained that the situation in Los Angeles had reached the highest danger category.
And all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades.
Officials classified the region as a Tier 1 threat zone, a classification normally reserved for threats linked to international terrorism. This alarming designation meant that investigators were no longer dealing with traditional cartels. They were confronting a criminal ecosystem that functioned with the capital, structure, and global reach of a multinational corporation. The spread of the network continued in silence. It did not advance through public displays of force. It grew through ports that handled enormous volumes of cargo. It expanded through banks that processed international wire transfers. It reached into data centers that stored financial records and communication logs. Each part of the system operated quietly, which made detection difficult and slowed the government's response.
And bad guy, he's a guy that is making a lot of drugs. We've just, as of today, stopped all payments going to Colombia.
As the network adapted to new challenges, law enforcement agencies realized they needed to change as well. The old investigative methods could not match a structure that rebuilt itself faster than it could be dismantled. Investigators understood that this conflict had evolved into a race between a criminal system that learned at high speed and a government that needed to find a way to keep up. The contagion spread quietly through ports, banks, and data centers. And as the network evolved, law enforcement had no choice but to evolve with it. America strikes back. Within a few weeks, the federal response escalated into full motion. U.S. authorities across multiple departments coordinated under a unified task force known as Sentinel.
We have a lot of drugs pouring into our country, coming in for a long time. And these came out of Venezuela.
The operation was designed to cut off the financial lifeblood of the sprawling criminal networks that had spread to cities across the country. Advanced AI-driven scanners were deployed at every major port to inspect shipping containers for hidden contraband. Specialized teams in federal agencies traced cryptocurrency transactions that had once been considered untraceable nighttime drone patrols, monitored coastlines, highways, and transit hubs, intercepting narcotics before they could reach local distributors. Surveillance was constant and meticulous, covering every port, warehouse, and shipping route linked to the network. Law enforcement analysts tracked digital ledgers in real time, mapping the flow of money from overseas brokers to domestic shell companies. Every movement was analyzed, every shipment cross-referenced, and every anomaly investigated. The results were staggering. Hundreds of individuals connected to these crimes were arrested.
Will the Mexican army use the recent success to launch an all-out assault, or will the cartels rain down more terror?
Billions of dollars in illicit assets were seized. Hundreds of indictments were issued across several states. It became the largest organized crime takedown in modern American history. Yet despite the scale of the operation, federal agencies understood that the victory was temporary. Each time a hub was dismantled, fragments of the network resurfaced elsewhere. Shell companies reappeared under new names. Digital accounts that had been neutralized returned online. Encrypted servers in foreign countries automatically restored lost data. Observers compared the network to a hydra. When one node was removed, 2 or 3 more took its place. The network adapted faster than law enforcement could dismantle it. For the first time in decades, U.S. authorities were no longer simply reacting. A new strategy emerged, combining global intelligence sharing with cutting-edge technology. Allies in neighboring countries and across Europe provided live information about shipments, financial flows, and operational movements. Cyber forensics teams analyzed encrypted communications, while drones and AI scanning systems became the front line of a silent war. Investigators moved with precision, targeting the criminal infrastructure rather than chasing fleeting, visible targets. Entire financial systems were infiltrated and exposed without public notice, and couriers were intercepted before they could complete their deliveries. Los Angeles, once a city defined by glamour, fame, and freedom, has transformed into a testing ground for this new type of covert warfare. Buildings were searched, hidden vaults discovered, shipments intercepted, and financial networks dismantled, all under the radar of the public eye. The city itself has become both battlefield and laboratory for the fight against modern organized crime. And as the authorities tightened their grip, it became clear that the stakes are no longer local. The world is watching to see who would emerge victorious in this hidden war. What do you think about this war between the cartels and Mafia? Comment down below.